What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You guys already know what it is. It's draft season all year long, and today we have another full mock draft here for you guys. Now, before we get this thing started, I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to all of my supporters and subscribers on this channel, because we just recently hit 500 subscribers on the channel, which is just a huge milestone for me because I don't even know 500 people in real life. So just an absolute surreal number. But now we are on the road to 600 subscribers. So if you are not subscribed and are interested in anything related to the NFL draft, this is definitely going to be the channel for you, so consider subscribing. So here we have a new mock draft because the Saints traded away Sean Payton for a first-round pick, so they will now be selecting in the first round after the Denver Broncos acquired Sean Payton, the former head coach of the New Orleans Saints. So the Chicago Bears picking number 1 overall. Last time, I gave them Will Anderson out of Alabama. This time, we're going to go the opposite direction in Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter is considered the more rare prospect in this year's draft because of his ability to create pass rush while also being a very efficient run stopper. And he's considered rare because not many guys from the interior defensive line can create pass rush like he can. There's been a handful of guys in the past, more recently, like Aaron Donald or Ndamukong Suh, but even that isn't that recent. So, very interesting prospect there. I did put a poll recently on my channel saying who is the better defensive prospect, and majority said Will Anderson, but there was a handful of people who thought that Jalen Carter was better because he's the more rare prospect. So, you can go either way with this number 1 overall pick. You take either of those guys, I think you leave the draft with a really good football player. Now, in my last mock draft, we went Bryce Young here for the Houston Texans, but we're going to switch it up again, and we're going to go C.J. Stroud here out of Ohio State. Now, C.J. Stroud put on an absolute performance and just absolutely demolished that Georgia defense. And the thing about Bryce Young is that he is on the shorter side, and that could possibly concern some teams. And so if you do think that Bryce Young is the better quarterback, as I do, we can't rule out the possibility of another quarterback potentially going before him. And CJ Stroud, I mean, he put his athleticism on display. Haven't seen him run a ton in college, but that last game really showed off what he can do. And so it's really possible that CJ Stroud could be the first quarterback taken off the board. And for me, it's really close between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I think that these are both really good prospects at the quarterback position. I think it's like 1A and 1B. And so I don't really mind CJ Stroud going here number 2 overall. Now, no-brainer pick. Should be an instant one. Will Anderson to the Arizona Cardinals. This is a team that doesn't have anyone really at the edge rusher spot. I mean, you have Marcus Golden. He's decent, but we need a true playmaker on this defense to pair up with Budda Baker. I think Will Anderson is definitely the answer to that. By far the best edge rusher in this year's class, and like I mentioned before, could be the number 1 overall pick. And something that a lot of people don't people do talk about this with Will Anderson, but, you know, he does have like a huge sack total, right? But he's also a very willing and very dominant run stopper as well, very disruptive in that department of his game as well. So I think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked with Will Anderson. Just the full package at the edge rusher spot. I think he's going to be one hell of a football player. Again, another pick that's going to be really easy for us to make. We're going to go ahead and take Bryce Young. So we have back-to-back Alabama players coming off the board, but the Indianapolis Colts need to get out of this draft with a quarterback, and they could potentially trade up to the number 1 overall spot to get their guy. But if Bryce Young falls into their lap at number 4, I don't think they'd be complaining at all. But for a team who's had so many veteran quarterbacks, like literally going through a carousel, they need to get some youth in that position, just develop a guy and have some stability at the quarterback position and not have to rotate through an older player year after year. Not knowing who your quarterback's going to be, it's going to help with the overall chemistry of the football team and the development of whoever it is that's going to be there playing quarterback for them. Here for the Seattle Seahawks, I'm going to go ahead and take Bryan Bresee here, who many would consider to be the number 2 interior defensive lineman in this year's draft behind Jalen Carter. Look, the reason why we're bringing him in here is because he's going to be that big body in the middle that the Seahawks need to stop the run. And, you know, Seahawks fans are constantly complaining about how their defense can't stop the run. You bring in a guy like Bryan Bresee, he is going to be starting day 1 and will definitely shore up those defensive problems that they have with the run game. So I think that this is great for them. I mean, this isn't even their pick, really. In all technicality, because it's Denver's pick, so it is truly a luxury for them to be picking up here, but huge addition to their defense. Here for the Detroit Lions, now, this is a team that is going to have some free agents leaving, some key free agents, and we're going to have little to no depth at the cornerback position after Amani Oruwariye and Mike Hughes potentially leave in free agency, which I think is the route that the Lions are going to take. So what we are going to do right here is take a cornerback right here, and we're going to go ahead and take Christian Gonzalez. Now, personally, Christian Gonzalez isn't my number one cornerback in this year's draft, but I mean, he's been a hot and popular name in my comment section, along with Joey Porter as well. I mean, there are so many comments calling for, draft Christian Gonzalez and draft Joey Porter, and I have gotten those guys their fair share in my mock drafts, but yeah, there's just an overwhelming amount of support for both of those guys. So this is for you guys, the fans, but this is also a huge need here for the Detroit Lions. We're going to go Christian Gonzalez here to shore up that cornerback spot. Pair him up with Jeff Okudah. You got two press man-to-man coverage corners on the outside. I think it can be a good duo in the near future for them. But just like the Seattle Seahawks, technically this isn't their pick. This is this is the Rams pick. And so it's a huge luxury for both of these teams to be drafting this high and getting some really, really talented players at the top of the board. This is a pick that's not going to change from my last mock draft, and we're going to go with Will Levis here. Look, they just need to go out and get a quarterback. It is the most important position in all of football. I don't think there's any debate about that. And they're not going to have Derek Carr at quarterback in all likelihood. So we're going to just get the best quarterback that's on the board. I mean, many of you guys might, say Anthony Richardson, but, it is debatable. But we are going to go with Will Levis right here just because of the arm talent that he possesses. Some people are comparing him to Josh Allen in that sense. I don't know if it's at that level, but I do see where you're coming from, where Will Levis's highs are really high, but his lows are extremely low. So most certainly a developmental quarterback here at number 7 overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, we're going to go ahead here with the Atlanta Falcons and take Tyree Wilson. This is a team that certainly needs edge rusher help. I gave them Myles Murphy last time. We're going to switch it up here and give them another guy. And this is actually my number 2 edge rusher in this year's class in Tyree Wilson. When he measures his wingspan, is going to have one of the longest, if not the longest wingspan in this entire draft class. Tyree Wilson is standing at 6'6", so he's a really long and tall dude, which, I mean, the arm length is insane. I think that's going to be a huge advantage to him. He's a very raw talent right now, but, once he puts it all together, and I think he will find a way to do that with some good coaching, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, just think about that, right? You have a guy and he uses his arms to his full extension. It's going to be hard to block this guy if he really knows how to utilize his attributes. So his physical attributes is what I'm saying. So Tyree Wilson, I think, is a guy where you can't see what he's going to be yet, but the potential because of his physicality and his traits, I think could be something special in this league. And for the Carolina Panthers, now we're going to go ahead and take Myles Murphy, who many believe is the number 2 guy. I have him as my number 3, but this is a more athletic build at the edge rusher position here in this year's class, but uses a combination of speed and power to get to the quarterback. And the one thing that I'm not super confident about him, and this can definitely be coached, and he could definitely improve in this area of his game. It's not impossible to change it, but it's that he needs a little bit more pass rush moves in his arsenal. He kind of uses one move to get to the quarterback and doesn't do that consistently enough, in my opinion. And so if he can just add a little bit more finesse moves or even power moves to his bag of tricks, I think it would really be beneficial to Myles Murphy's game. But, either of these guys, I mean, I think that they're both going to be great. And I don't know. I could see either going before the other. So back-to-back edge rushers here going to NFC South teams. Here, we're going to throw a massive curveball here with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're sitting here with the number 10 overall pick. And now, I know this is going to be controversial because many people are going to say, hey, this is a team that just runs the heck out of the football. They don't need to pass the ball. I don't care. We're going to take Jackson Smith and Jigbo right here. He is going to be plug in and play, starting slot receiver on this football team. And look, here's the thing. You have one guy like A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith go down, right? I think you need another wide receiver. Like, in terms of that, like, you have Quez Watkins and Zach Pascal, but they haven't done much this year. And so I think you really need another guy, and it just makes this offense even more unstoppable. And I understand that they have potential free agents departing like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, T.J. Edwards, and even James Bradbury, but I'm going to make the assumption right now that all of those guys stay on the team, if not most of them. And who's going to start if I pick him here at number 10, most likely a wide receiver here in Jackson Smith-Njigba. And I think he's just a great value here just because I think just like a guy who I have him as my comparison in Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think these are guys that are getting overlooked because they're not necessarily the most athletic guys in this year's draft class in terms of the wide receiver position. But this dude knows how to ball. Didn't play this year because of an injury, but has the ability to take over games. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, you can make the argument, is one of the better receivers in this year's, in the NFL. And so I think it's a good comparison there with Jackson Smith-Njigba. But, you know, I do understand the perspective where they do run the ball too much, but let's have fun with this mock draft, guys. Let's give him a really good player as he sit here at number 10 overall, who would be starting day one on a very, very good football team with a lot of depth. Now here for the Tennessee Titans, I'm going to go ahead and give them an offensive tackle, and we're going to go Anton Harrison here, who is my number one left tackle and overall tackle in this year's draft as of right now. I just think that he's one of the more physical football players in this year's draft, and you know, you need those physical offensive linemen to set the tone on your team, and this is a team that desperately needs offensive lineman help, especially at the tackle position, one of the worst offensive line groups in the NFL last year. So, you know, whether it's Tannehill or Willis starting next year, most likely Tannehill, you got to keep him upright and protect him, and I think Anton Harrison is the guy there at number 11. Number 12 over here, we are going to go with a guy who is an absolute freak in Quentin Johnson. And people love Quentin Johnson because he's standing at 6'4", and not only is he good at the contested catch, but he's also good after the catch. And for a guy to be able to move like this after he has the ball in his hand, certainly is a rare talent. His signature spin move is one of the things that he likes to go to most of the time, and also can make a guy miss with a juke move out in open space. So to have a guy that big put on those type of moves in the open field, it's a deadly combination, and he has a very, very high ceiling. You know, it's almost like Mike Williams and Keenan Allen combined, sort of. I mean, I had to make that comparison off the top of my head. Both of those guys play on the same team. Has a similar build to Mike Williams, but has that same sort of athleticism after the catch as Keenan Allen. So could be a really, really good football player in Quentin Johnson there. And we need to get the Texans a wide receiver because Brandon Cooks is most likely not going to be a Houston Texan next year. And so we need to get our QB1, who we drafted earlier in this draft, in CJ Stroud, a big option there at wide receiver to go along with Nico Collins and hopefully John Mechie. Now here at number 13 overall with the New York Jets, we are also going to go with a tackle. Now, my number 2 tackle in this year's draft is Darnell Wright. However, you have Mekhi Becton at right tackle where Darnell Wright plays, so I want to go ahead and get a left tackle here. And we're going to go with my number 3 overall tackle in this year's draft in Peter Skoronski here. And I think that this is one of the smarter players in this year's draft, and he does go to Northwestern, which, if you guys aren't aware, you got to be pretty darn smart to get into that school. So a really high IQ player, and I'm not just saying that because he went to Northwestern. I mean, you watch him and you really understand that, or you can make the assumption that he really understands what he's doing just because of how he's playing. I'm definitely not going to ever get into Northwestern. But yeah, just a very high IQ player. Does a great job of sealing his blocks, and just, again, as I mentioned before, really understands his role and responsibility on each and every play. So his attention to detail, I think, is on point. Now, the next team also needs a tackle pretty desperately, and that's where Darnell Wright is going to go here, because you have Isaiah Wynn, who's going to be a free agent, and you also have Trent Brown, who's also most likely going to leave because neither of those guys played fantastic last year. So they're going to be headed into this offseason most likely with 2 tackle spots missing. We're going to address one of them here with Darnell Wright, who's a pretty solid option at right tackle because he did not give up a single sack at Tennessee this past season. Just an absolute wall, really, really difficult to move, and was really reliable. I mean, every snap you could count on him to not give up a pressure there, and I think this is going to be a huge addition for this Patriots offense and the protection of Matt Jones. Okay, now for the Green Bay Packers here, we are going to go ahead and take one of the better players available on the board in Brian Branch. Now, Brian Branch is listed as a safety. However, he does play more of a nickel cornerback role and also plays a lot of his snaps in the box. Just a very, very versatile player, but can also play safety. So the thing about him is you can move him all around, and he can do a lot of different things, and, you know, does well in man-to-man coverage. You can also drop him back into zone. You can put him in the box, as I mentioned, and use him as a blitzer. I think this is like a Green Bay Packers type of player here. And even though we think maybe that they should draft a wide receiver again this year or potentially one of the tight ends, you know they love to go defense. And so I think they're going to continue that trend here if Brian Branch is sitting there on the board at number 15. Now, this is a dream scenario for any Washington Commanders fan because you need a quarterback here. And Anthony Richardson is just sitting here on the board. Now, if you're not a huge fan of Anthony Richardson, I totally understand that just because completion percentage doesn't look all that great and, seems like a very, very raw talent who needs a lot of development. And all of those things are true, but his athleticism is just absolutely off the charts at the quarterback position. You don't see many guys like that playing the quarterback position. I mean, you have like a Justin Fields and a Lamar Jackson, but the thing that sets him apart from guys like that is even though he has an excellent running ability, he also has an absolute cannon of an arm. And similar to Will Levis, I think his highs are very, very high. We just haven't seen as much of it compared to Will Levis in terms of the passing game, but adding his element of the running game, I think could potentially make Anthony Richardson a first-round talent this year. And seems to me like it could be a good fit here for the Washington Commanders who need a quarterback. Heineke certainly is in the future. Neither is Carson Wentz. Get someone in to bring in some promise and some hope for the future there at number 16 overall. Now, I had to think about this pick here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I think this makes too much sense because Joey Porter used to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's bring in Joey Porter Jr. here. I think that this is just a fun combination right here just because Joey Porter used to play on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So bringing Joey Porter Jr. to the Pittsburgh Steelers to play cornerback for them is most likely going to be a starting cornerback day one on this football team. Again, one of the more popular football players here on my channel in the comment section. Guys are always constantly calling for Joey Porter, so the support for him is absolutely tremendous. But I think that this would be, I don't know, I think Pittsburgh would just go insane if they picked him up here, but he also fills a need, so perfect timing for the Porter family and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're going to reunite here in 2023. Now here at number 18, this was also another tough one for me, and initially in my first mock draft, I had the Lions taking a linebacker, but in my comment section of the Lions mock draft, fans were saying how the GM Brad Holmes is most likely not going to take a linebacker in the first round based off of his statement that he made. And so taking a look at what's on the board, like we could get another corner. However, I'm not interested in getting another boundary corner after we already got Christian Gonzalez, even though Devin Witherspoon is one hell of a football player. But I just don't know a ton of options that we could go with here. But I did really like Lucas Van Ness, who is a guy who very recently just got a lot of attention through this draft process. And Luke Van Ness, I would consider him to be more of a power edge rusher. Now, the reason why I want to draft him here at 18 is because this is a team that could use some help in the interior of the defensive line. And so them running a 3-4 scheme, he could potentially bounce out to the outside to be an outside linebacker, even though those roles are kind of reserved for Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston, who's very underrated at the moment. But I think his versatility to play both inside and out is a huge plus here for the Detroit Lions, and he wouldn't be taking time away from either of those guys if you don't want him to. But I think could be a very efficient run stopper. He's around 280 pounds, so you could fit him in there at that edge rusher spot on a 3-4 defense, and he wouldn't be lacking any size there, but truly just a bull rusher and can be a big time disruptor in the pass game from the interior of that defensive line. So, is considered an edge rusher, but I would like to consider him more of that 3-4 defensive end role here for the Detroit Lions. Now, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we're going to go ahead and take Devin Witherspoon. This is a guy that I'm sure many of you guys are thinking in your head should go much sooner in the draft, and I completely agree. Devin Witherspoon is one of my favorite, not just cornerbacks, but overall players in this year's draft, and I just wasn't sure where I would put him otherwise. I know I did mock a cornerback to the Eagles in my first mock draft, but I did want to have a little bit of fun with it. Like, this is a serious channel, don't get me wrong, but we went cornerback last time, and I wanted to just explore different options and how it could change the draft. And players are going to end up slipping just like Devin Witherspoon. So he could have gone 17 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He could have gone 10 to the Eagles, maybe somewhere else in between. But Devin Witherspoon definitely makes sense here to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a team that's going to be potentially losing some guys in free agency like Jamel Dean, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and so we need to address that cornerback position to make up for those potential losses. So very interesting pick right there. It would be huge value for them at 19 if they could snag Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois there at number 19. At number 20 here, we're going to take one of my what I would consider to be one of the more underrated prospects here in this year's draft. We're going to go ahead and take Will McDonald. I think Will McDonald is one of the more physical defensive linemen in this year's draft. Just, I think, plays with the physicality that is very desirable here now in the NFL. The most physical teams win football games. It's as simple as that. Not all the time, but they always give their teams a solid chance. And I think Will McDonald definitely fits that mold. I think just does a great job of using his strength and his speed to his advantage. You see him kind of like toss linemen to the side sometimes, and I think that's one of his better pass rush moves. But this is a team that certainly needs edge rusher help to go along with the Uchenna Nwosu. We are making a huge emphasis to improve this defense this upcoming season with Brian Brzee on the inside, now Will McDonald on the outside. I don't expect him to be super good day one, but considering how productive he's been at Iowa State and how much talent he possesses, I think this could be a really good investment in the long term. Now here at number 21, this is where the run on wide receivers is going to start. We're going to first go ahead and take Zay Flowers, who I'm so happy is finally getting respect from PFF here. He was like way down on the big board. I think it was around like round 3 or something like that. Now he's finally projected here in the first round, and I completely agree with it. This is the most explosive receiver in this year's draft, and just does a great job in his change of direction. Is a very agile football player, and standing at 5'10", he's not just a run after the catch guy, but is also a very good route runner and is also a very good deep threat, which I think is something that the Chargers lacked in their offense, and I know part of that has to do with play calling, but Mike Williams will be their 50-50 guy. Their run after the catch guy is certainly still going to be Keenan Allen, and then after that, you're going to have Zay Flowers, who is going to be that deep threat, kind of do-it-all type of guy. I understand you have Jalen Guyton, but I think that Zay Flowers is just a better overall player, and it's definitely going to help Justin Herbert. Do not get mad. Oh my God. Justin Herbert, Chargers fans, and Kellen Moore, your new offensive coordinator. I don't know where I got Joe Burrow from. I've been talking for a long time, so give me some slack. Oh my God. I bet y'all are wishing that you had Joe Burrow, though, no cap. Okay, now we're going to go ahead here with the Baltimore Ravens, and we're going to take one of my favorite wide receivers in this year's draft, someone who I think is still underrated. We're going to take Rashee Rice here out of SMU. This is one of the more productive players in all of college football. This is not just based off of statistics. That's not how I rank my players, obviously, but I think statistics do tell part of a story, and Rashee Rice was in the top 3 in total receiving yards in all of college football last year, so I certainly think that means something. But a guy with a lot of size and a lot of speed to go along with it, I think that this could be a very productive player. I'm not saying that he's going to be like this player, but I would make a comparison to him like a A.J. Brown. I think he's that similar build, similar speed type of play style type of guy. Very dominant receiver. Would love to see him playing in Baltimore because, if Lamar Jackson does come back, this is a big target that he can rely on aside from his tight ends here. And so I think that this would be a huge addition for a team who really lacks wide receiver talent and depth at the moment. Now, I'm going to go ahead and continue this wide receiver run here. We are going to select Jordan Addison here for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, here's the thing. I've seen cornerback mocked a lot to the Minnesota Vikings. However, I do feel like the Vikings are going to head into this draft and feel all right with the depth and the talent that they currently have on the team. I'm going to make the assumption that Patrick Peterson and Duke Shelley will be returning as free agents just because they both played really well last year. Those were the 2 starting corners at the back end of the season last year for good reason. But after that, you also have younger guys who are still on rookie contracts, like Cam Dantzler, who was starting at the beginning of the year, Caleb Evans, who was showing a lot of flashes. They're a former 4th-round pick from last year, but suffered like 2 to 3 concussions this past season, and also Andrew Booth, who you invested a high 2nd-round pick in last year as well. And so I just feel like there is enough talent, depth, and potential at the position where I just don't feel like it makes a ton of sense to bring in another cornerback. However, if they don't bring back certain players or certain players get traded away, cut, or whatever it is, maybe then we could potentially see them bring in a quarterback or cornerback. But the way that it looks now, I'm going to go wide receiver because, unfortunately, my boy Adam Thielen on my wall might not be a Viking next year because of the cap situation that the Vikings are currently in. And so, even though Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson are great, we need to get another receiver here for Kirk Cousins, and that's going to be Jordan Addison here out of USC, who is really, really good in run after the catch. Now, for the Jacksonville Jaguars here, we are going to go and take an interior offensive lineman because you guys know me, love to build through the trenches, love to build around a young quarterback and protect him, keep him upright. We're going to go ahead and take O'Cyrus Torrence here out of Florida just to go ahead and protect Trevor Lawrence. This team could use help at the guard position, and a dude in O'Cyrus Torrence at 340 pounds, I mean, we talked about Darnell Wright being hard to move. O'Cyrus Torrence at 340 pounds, yeah, not many people are going to be moving him. So it's just going to be a solid presence, big body dude right there at that right guard position there for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, for the New York Giants here, would love to get him a wide receiver, but just taking a look at the wide receiver position, I like some of these guys. However, I just haven't seen them mocked in a ton of first round mock drafts, and so I think that could potentially be a sign of things to come in the real NFL draft. So I am going to refrain from taking one right here. So we are going to go to the next best thing for this team, and that's cornerback. And we are going to go ahead and take Cam Smith out of South Carolina. I think that he plays with the swagger and the confidence that you need. I think he also has really good ball skills, and I think can keep up with any wide receiver in the league. I think Cam Smith is a really, really promising cornerback that not a lot of people are really hyping up or giving a ton of respect to. Cam Smith is also one of my favorite players in this year's draft, so really excited to see where he can go. But for a team that has little to no depth at the cornerback position and could use more talent there as well to pair up with Adoree Jackson, I think this pick makes a ton of sense. Here, this is a team that, very similar to the Giants, could also use a wide receiver voice crack and a cornerback. We're going to go cornerback as well just because I talked about the wide receiver issue already. We're going to go ahead and take Kelee Ringo. Now, Kelee Ringo dropped a lot in this recent revamp of the big board here for PFF, but I'm not sure yet. I think, if he makes a significant fall, as we see here, it's going to be after like the combine and the pro days and stuff like that. Right now, though, I still think that Kelee Ringo could potentially be a back-end first-round pick here, and this is another team that could certainly use help on the boundary at the cornerback position, and so we're going to go ahead and take Kelee Ringo here. Just a very, very physical, big-body cornerback. Does a really good job at man-to-man press at the line of scrimmage. I mean, he can really take advantage of a smaller receiver if you allow him to jam you at the line of scrimmage. But once he gets beat, it's pretty much over for him. And that's the huge knock on Kelee Ringo, where you can't really teach speed. And so that is concerning in that aspect. But if he times well, I don't think teams will be concerned about him after that. Here for the Buffalo Bills, this is a player where I think he could potentially go earlier in this year's draft, but I think he will find his way into the first round, and that's Bijan Robinson. They have invested so much into trying to get a new running back. I mean, you had Devin Singletary, you had James Cook, you had Zach Moss. You traded him away, and then you got Nyheim Hines. There just really hasn't been a guy who is the solution to that run game, and Josh Allen has really been their best runner on their team. They need a running back to do the running for them, and that's going to be Bijan Robinson here, the consensus #1 running back in this year's class. Here for the Cincinnati Bengals, we are going to go ahead and take Paris Johnson. I'm not a huge Paris Johnson fan. However, I do still think that he will find his way into the first round, strictly off of his physical traits. He's a really big tackle, but I just don't think that he's been consistent enough. But like I said, could find his way into the first round to a tackle-needy team. And we're sitting here with the Bengals here, who I think many would consider him to be good value here at 28. I'm not really sure what your guys' thoughts are on Paris Johnson. You can let me know in the comment section below, but I don't think Jonah Williams is going to be the answer there at left tackle, so just bring someone in new to help out Joe Burrow up front on that offensive line. For the New Orleans Saints now, and again, they got this pick from the Denver Broncos after the Denver Broncos acquired their former head coach Sean Payton in a trade earlier today as I'm recording this video. We're going to go ahead here and take quarterback Tanner McKee out of Stanford. Here is a pure pocket passer. And look, I was trying to find another position or another player, another prospect that we could potentially take here, but I mentioned this earlier, right? Quarterback is the most important position in football. Like, I don't think it's debatable at all. And so, do you really want to head into this year with, I don't know, Jameis Winston or potentially Andy Dalton again as your starting quarterback? I do understand that they could make a trade to bring in a veteran cornerback or sign one in free agency, but right now that's TBD. And so if they don't have a quarterback, I mean, what are you going to do, right? I just think you need to bring one in here. Tanner McKee is a guy that I've seen off and on mocked in the first round. I think if he gets taken, it's got to be as a late first rounder. But for a team who doesn't have a quarterback, I mean, here's a decent pocket passer here in Tanner McKee out of Stanford. Definitely doesn't have any athletic ability in terms of like a run game to extend plays. So, hopefully Trevor Penning develops and can help out that entire offensive line, which is a pretty solid unit. I mean, not one of the top units, but got to protect your pocket quarterback after this. So, I don't know. Maybe some of you Saints fans are underwhelmed by the pick. But you need a quarterback. So, okay. And for the Kansas City Chiefs here, we are going to go ahead and make an emphasis to protect Patrick Mahomes. We're going to take Broderick Jones. Orlando Brown didn't have the best season, and you need a tackle. I mean, I'm not saying that this is going to replace Orlando Brown Jr., but you could definitely use some tackle help here to protect Patrick Mahomes, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. Again, as I mentioned before, so important to me to protect the quarterback and build through the trenches. That's exactly what we're going to do with, oh my goodness, that is exactly what we're going to do here with Broderick Jones. I need to slow it down a little bit. The words are coming out faster than I can process them. But Broderick Jones, really good blocker on that left side of his offensive line when he was at Georgia. Could potentially be kicking over to right tackle here in this situation, but does a really good job at the second level of getting blocks on screens and those type of plays. So you need that athletic, agile type build at tackle right there. This is definitely your guy here in Broderick Jones. And then at 31, we are going to go with, now, there are several options here. Nolan Smith, BJ Ojulari, even Andre Carter. However, I really like Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Just a very, very physical, and uses his strength to his advantage here with Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I mean, just a very, very strong defensive lineman. I would make the argument that he is the strongest in this year's class, but also has a fair share of really athletic speed moves, pass rush moves that he uses in his game. And the one thing that stands out to me that I haven't seen from a lot of the other edge rusher prospects is that he's broken a lot of double teams and just sheds right through both of them. And so I think that's really promising for a guy who many would consider to be a raw talent, but he's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve already, and he's a really strong dude. So I like him here as maybe not starting here for the Philadelphia Eagles, but definitely in that rotation of pass rushers. But I think he could definitely find himself a spot at some point in the season. I think this would be a huge addition. I mean, considering that they brought in a guy like Robert Quinn late in this season to shore up a pass rush that they want to get with a rotation as well. So here we have it, our full mock draft here after the Saints trade. And so hopefully you Saints fans are at least somewhat happy here, but I mean, geez, do you really want Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston as your quarterback again? I'd say no. And let's get ourselves a future quarterback that we can potentially have something with here, because you already know what you got with Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston, and that's nothing. And so here we have it here, our full first round mock draft here in 2023 after the Sean Payton trade to the Denver Broncos. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Again, thank you for everyone who has been subscribed. 500 subscribers is a lot, but now we are on the road to 600. So if you are interested in anything related to the NFL draft, consider hitting that subscribe button. And until then, I will see you guys all later.